So by now we all know that the M4A1 is basically the best gun in all of Modern Warfare, no questions asked. Even after the multiple nerfs that it's received so far, it is still an incredibly lethal weapon that can win fights at any range with ease. But what happens when you take the most dominant assault rifle in the game and turn it into an SMG in a game where the meta doesn't really favor submachine guns all that much? Well, today we're breaking down just that as we take the base M4A1 and turn it into the Colt 9mm SMG via the gunsmith. It might not seem effective, it might not seem overpowered, but at the end of the day, the point of this series is not to make the most overpowered setups, and instead to find and build as many secret weapons as possible. However, before we get into all of that for today, if you guys are new here, hey, hi, how you doing? Each and every day I am covering the latest news and intel within the world of Call of Duty, so if you do want to stay up to date with all of that stuff, feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on, that way you'll always know when I upload a new video. And of course, if you do enjoy this one, let me know by dropping a like rating on it, as it would be much appreciated. And now let's get into building the Colt 9mm SMG. So, first and foremost, obviously you are going to need to have the M4A1 unlocked, but luckily it is the third AR you end up unlocking, so you do gain access to it pretty early on. However, in order to get some of the attachments that we need for today's conversion kit, you do need to level up the weapon quite a bit in order to actually unlock those, so just prepare to use the M4 for a little while before you can access the full conversion. Anyways, that said, the first attachment that I have on my Colt 9mm setup is the Monolithic Suppressor, which unfortunately is the very last muzzle attachment you end up unlocking, but after experimenting around with this setup and with this weapon for a few matches, this suppressor was definitely something that I found made the weapon a lot more effective. Now, I will say this is not a mandatory attachment like some of the others. You can still make the base Colt 9mm without this on there. However, to make the gun a bit better, I would recommend using it. The Monolithic Suppressor ends up increasing the damage range on top of adding the basic sound suppression, so both of those pros are pretty beneficial. But at the same time, this suppressor does also decrease the aim down sight speed and the aim walking steadiness, so just keep that in mind. Then after that, we've got the first mandatory attachment of the conversion, which is going to be the FFS 11.5-inch commando barrel, and conveniently enough, that is the very first barrel attachment you end up unlocking, so you can access this one pretty quickly. This barrel makes the M4 appear much smaller as it is a bit more compact than the stock barrel, and thus it ends up increasing the aim down sight speed and the overall movement speed in exchange for a slight decrease in bullet velocity and also recoil control. However, that improvement on the ADS speed does kind of counter the decrease that we just got there with the suppressors, so that balances out pretty nicely. Moving on from that, we are then going to be using the Forged Tac CQS stock attachment, as this stock looks awfully similar to the stock that you'd often find on the Colt 9mm, so in terms of accuracy, this stock is definitely the best choice. Now, the Forged Tac CQS stock ends up increasing the aim down sight speed while only decreasing the aiming stability. So once again, we get a slight increase to the overall mobility there, which ultimately is going to be a big help, being that this will eventually be an SMG by the time we're done with the attachment lineup. And obviously, the higher the mobility stat in this case, the better. We then jump over to the ammunition department for our next attachment, and this one, much like the barrel and the stock, is another mandatory one, and that is going to be the 9mm Para 32 round magazines. Now, these mags change the M4 from a 5.56 NATO ammunition type to a 9mm Parabellum ammo type, which is necessary in order to take the M4A1 from being an AR and converting it into an SMG. So arguably, this is the single most important attachment of the entire setup. Now, when you do equip the 9mm ammo, you do notice an increase to the fire rate and also the aiming recoil control. However, being that we are taking an assault rifle and turning it into a submachine gun, the damage properties all around decrease quite a bit, as the overall damage and also the damage range are listed as cons on this setup. Then finally, I end up using the stippled grip tape on this setup too, which has become kind of a standard attachment on all of my classes, as it increases the aim down sight speed and also the sprint to fire speed in exchange for a decrease in aiming stability. And quite frankly, I do think the stippled grip is one of the single best attachments you can run in the entire game, as it's available on pretty much everything, and that mobility increase is huge if you are someone who likes to play a bit more aggressive. Anyways, we've got our 5 attachments on there, and like I mentioned, the FFS 11.5-inch commando barrel, the Forged Tac CQS stock, and the 9mm Para 32 round mags are really the quote-unquote must-have attachments in order to really make this conversion kit work. The other 2 attachment spots you can just choose based off of what you find to be the best for your own personal playstyle, but I do think the 2 attachments that I chose offer some solid pros to the class overall. Also, I do believe you can make the MPX from this setup too, but instead of the Forged Tac CQS stock, you would actually want to go with the no stock attachment to be a bit more realistic there. Anyways, when you do have all 5 of these attachments on there specifically, you can see that via the stat sheet, the accuracy increases just a bit, the fire rates and the mobility each increase some as well, and then the damage, the range, and the control all decrease ever so slightly. So you end up getting a pretty nice balance there in my own opinion. And when it comes to how this weapon actually performs compared to the M4A1 as an assault rifle, it is really a night and day difference. As I said in the intro, we're so used to seeing the M4A1 in the kill feed a ton because it is simply the most consistent weapon in the entire game. You know, it can melt at any given range, it has very minimal recoil, and in general the thing is just an all-out beast. But I'd be willing to bet that all of those M4s you see in the kill feed are the AR version of the weapon 90+% of the time, because the Colt 9mm SMG is just simply not as efficient in as many engagements. Now, long range, this thing is pretty rough, I'm just gonna put that out there, but all things considered, that is really to be expected. After all, this is now an SMG and not an AR, and SMGs don't really have incredible range as is, so that trait is kind of true to class in that sense. Medium range, this weapon is definitely a bit more effective than it is long range. It can still get a decent amount of hit markers in some fights. Its consistency can be a little all over the place, but it's definitely not awful mid-range. However, up close in those CQC situations, now that is where this weapon really shines. The increased fire rate and the 9mm ammo really proved to be dominating factors in those close quarters engagements, and when using this weapon, playing on maps like Shoot House, Hackney Yard, and Gunrunner are probably going to offer the best chance at succeeding the most. I did try playing a fair share of ground war with this weapon, since that really is my go-to mode in this game, but to be completely honest, it felt like it took a lot more effort to do well on those larger maps of Krovnik Farmland, Tovorsk District, and Karst River Quarry than it did on, say, Shoot House. So this weapon is definitely CQC oriented, and you will most certainly notice that when you are using it in-game. Now, when compared to the other conversion kit weapons that we've built over the past few weeks, I do want to say the Colt 9mm SMG is up there towards the top of the list if you are using it on smaller maps. However, outside of those smaller maps, it is not nearly as useful, and it would definitely then take a lower position in general. But I do feel like it beats out the MP5K in terms of overall SMG effectiveness, and I would probably put it the closest with the AUG in terms of just how efficient it is to actually use. The AK-12 and the RPK still really hold down the top spots in my mind, but then after that, the AUG and the Colt 9mm probably stand in the 3 and 4 spots respectively. So overall, the Colt 9mm SMG conversion can be a pretty solid one when used correctly, or it can be utterly abysmal when used incorrectly, so just be conscious of that when using it. But other than that, I would highly recommend giving this setup a try. Plus, I've found nothing more enjoyable than taking out someone who is using the regular M4 with this version of the M4, just because it is such an underdog in the engagements. Anyways, with all of that being said, that is effectively how you can make the Colt 9mm SMG here in Modern Warfare, and that is going to wrap things up for today. If you guys found the video helpful, or if you just simply enjoyed it, let me know by dropping a like rating on it, as it would be much appreciated. And of course, if you are new here and you want to stay up to date with everything going on in the world of Call of Duty, including all the latest news and intel, updates and leaks, and pretty much everything else in between, feel free to subscribe with your post notifications turned on, that way you'll always know when I post a new video. As always, if you would like to check out any of my partners, be sure to use code IMMORTAL on all G Fuel, Control Freak, and Respawn products. You can find all of those links listed down in the description below, and once again, thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.